Hello everyone! I originally planned this video as a small guide on how to simplify working with color in Procreate, but it turned out to be even more informative than expected. In this video, I'll show you how to work with layers, which brushes I use, and of course, how I color my illustrations. So get comfortable and let's begin. The first thing I do is set sketch layer to multiply mode and lower its opacity. Then I create a new layer and place it under the sketch layer. This will be the background layer. The sketch layer will always remain on top of all other layers throughout the process. On the third layer, I add the base skin color. All other layers will be stacked on top of it using the clipping mask feature. To add the texture of traditional materials, you can use a Nickel Rule brush for filling. It's a standard Procreate brush. If you prefer a smooth texture, the Script brush is a great option. This brush allows for solid fills without missing any pixels. Overall, you can use any brush for filling. It all depends on your style and preferences. For example, you can achieve an uneven edge effect. Personally, I use a fill brush. This is a custom brush I made for myself. It adds a slight texture and I like how it creates a slightly rough edge. I start by outlining the shape and then filling it in. When filling, you can slide your Apple Pencil left or right without lifting it from the screen. This helps adjust the fill threshold and ensures no pixels are left unfilled. There's also a great feature called Continue Filling. If you have multiple objects to fill with the same color, you select the color, fill the first object, and then choose Continue Filling. This way, you don't have to repeatedly open the color palette to pick the same shade. Just tap the areas you want to fill and the color is applied instantly. For the hair, I use a gouache clean brush on a separate layer. This brush allows me to create the curls and waves I need right away. It's especially useful for drawing wavy or curly hair. I also fill the hat on a separate layer. One of the great things about Procreate is that you can rotate the canvas freely without losing quality, which makes it much easier to work without straining your hand. Next, I add the shirt color using clipping mask, which ensures that the paint stays within the shape of the underlying layer. I use the same technique to fill in the chickens and eyes, all on separate layers. I won't go into too much detail here, as the process is straightforward. Above the hat layer, I create a new line art layer. On this layer, I usually draw eyelashes, the outline of the nose, folds on clothes, and other details that need to be drawn or emphasized. Now I want to add some extra skin tone variation. To do this, I select the base skin color layer and turn on alpha lock to keep the paint within the existing fill. Using a soft brush, I create subtle color transition. For the hair shading, I use a bonobo chalk brush, applying a darker tone at the roots and gradually transitioning to a lighter shade at the tips. At this point, there is already some volume, and I want to add more depth to the hat. Using the freehand selection tool, I select the hat brim and darken it using the hue, saturation, and brightness settings. I also select the part of the shirt that should be in shadow and use a texture brush to darken it slightly, choosing a shade deeper than the base color. Ideally, you should plan out your colors in advance by making color thumbnails. However, I personally don't enjoy this stage, so I adjust the color on the go, once the base fills are in place. With the main fills complete, I start adding details. I create a new overlay layer with about 20–30% opacity. To make the character look more lively, I add the link painting to areas where blood vessels are closer to skin. These areas tend to appear slightly redder, such as fingertips, cheeks, nose, ears, elbows, and knees. I don't work on one part of the illustration to completion right away. I prefer to switch between different areas so that the entire drawing looks evenly developed at any stage. That's why I now move on to defining curly hair. I add lighter strands and enhance the depth with darker shades. Then I add line details to the shirt. A crucial next step is shading. I create a new layer in multiply mode with around 30% opacity. The opacity will vary depending on the chosen shadow color and the contrast of the scene's lighting. On a separate layer, I create overall shadows for the entire portrait. I individually select the silhouette of the girl, hair, and hat, then apply a shadow layer over them. You can see the difference when toggling this layer on and off. Using a soft eraser, I refine the shadows, removing them in areas where the light hits to create more depth. Above the shadow layer, I create a new layer for highlights. I set it to add mode and lower the opacity to 20%. Since my scene has warm lighting, I choose a warm yellow hue for the highlights. A useful tip: if your lighting is warm, shadows should be cool. If your lighting is cool, shadows should be warm. You can use a color wheel to find complementary contrast colors for your lighting and shadows. The next layer is highlights on the hair. I also use add mode. One of my favorite brushes for highlights is 360-degree brush by Eric Anthony, which I use in almost 80% of my artworks. I apply highlights to the hair, which immediately makes it look more dynamic. Using an eraser with the same brush shape, I adjust the highlights to refine their form. As a final touch, I add a light yellow outline around the character. This effect mimics backlighting, which occurs when a person is lit from behind. You have probably seen this effect in real life, like when taking a photo against a sunset. I absolutely love adding this type of lighting to my artworks because it gives the character a magical glow and enhance the overall atmosphere. After following the same steps for the chickens, here's the final result. Let me know in the comments what you think of this tutorial and what other topics you'd like me to cover. If this video was helpful, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Stay creative!